Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're jumping into the world of pathology to get to know two really unusual and totally different types of invasive breast cancer. Think of it as a tale of a deceptive invader versus a surrounded fortress. All right, let's get right into it. You know, when you hear breast cancer, your mind probably jumps straight to one thing, right? A lump. But what if a cancer didn't play by those rules? What if it was so sneaky it didn't form a lump at all, and instead it looked like something else entirely? That very question is at the core of our first case. Okay, so before we meet these two tumors, we gotta get one key concept down. A cancer becomes a real threat when it gets invasive. So what does that mean? Well, think of the tumor cells as escape artists. They break out of their original spot, get into the surrounding tissue, and then they find these highways, the lymphatic system or blood vessels, to travel all over the body. That ability to spread, which we call metastasis, is what makes cancer so dangerous. So here's how we're going to break it down today. First up, we'll meet the deceptive invader. Then we'll explore the surrounded fortress. After that, we'll put them side by side to really see the differences, and we'll wrap it all up with the final diagnosis. Let's go. All right, first up, inflammatory carcinoma. I call this one the deceptive invader for a really good reason. It's a master of disguise. You see, it looks like something way less serious, but in reality, it's one of the most aggressive forms of breast cancer out there. So how does it pull off this trick? Well, it all kicks off at a microscopic level. So step one, the cancer cells sneak into the tiny lymphatic vessels right there in the skin of the breast. Then, for step two, they start clumping together, creating these little blockades, kind of like gunk clogging up a drain pipe. Now, what happens when a drain is blocked? Exactly. The fluid, in this case lymph fluid, has nowhere to go, so it backs up. And that's step three, you get this really fast swelling. And the end result, step four, is that the breast becomes enlarged, red, and feels really tense. And here's the truly wild part. The breast looks red, it feels warm, it's swollen. I mean, for all the world, it looks exactly like an infection. But that's the deception. The name inflammatory carcinoma is actually kind of misleading. It's not a true inflammation caused by your immune system fighting something. Nope. It's really just a plumbing problem, a physical traffic jam in the lymphatic system caused by those tumor cells. So this all comes into focus when a pathologist looks at a tissue sample. Under the microscope, they find the smoking gun, those little clusters of cancer cells just jamming up the lymphatic channels in the skin. The tumor itself, it's usually a pretty aggressive one. We say it's poorly differentiated, which is just a technical way of saying the cells look really messy and disorganized, not like healthy, orderly cells. And it tends to spread out diffusely instead of forming a nice, neat ball. And here's the real kicker. You find hardly any actual inflammatory cells, which totally confirms it's not a real infection. And the fallout from this mechanism, well, it's pretty serious. Because the cancer gets a fast pass onto that lymphatic highway system, it can spread really early and really aggressively. This is why the 5-year survival rate is, unfortunately, less than 50%. And it's even worse if the cancer has already spread to distant parts of the body when it's first diagnosed. Okay, now let's completely switch gears. Our second case couldn't be more different. We're going from that sneaky invader to something I call the surrounded fortress, medullary carcinoma. First things first, this one is super rare. We're talking less than 1% of all breast cancers. And trust me, its biology is just as unusual as how often we see it. So you know how most cancers are described as having these spiky, crab-like tentacles that reach into the tissue around them? Well, medullary carcinoma throws that playbook out the window. It does the exact opposite. It grows in this solid sheet that just pushes its way forward, creating a nice, smooth, well-defined border. It's more like a ball pushing through sand than a weed growing roots. So what's creating that nice, smooth border? This is the coolest part. It's your body's own immune system doing the work. The tumor is literally surrounded by this thick wall of your body's own defender cells, lymphocytes, and plasma cells. Your body has sounded the alarm, recognized the tumor's a foreign invader, and has built a biological fortress right around it. It's incredible. Now, if we zoom in to the molecular level, this tumor has a very specific profile. For one, it's often seen in people with the BRCA1 gene mutation. And it's usually what we call triple negative. That just means it doesn't have receptors for estrogen or progesterone, and it doesn't have extra copies of the HER2 protein. And that's a really big deal for treatment, because it means the usual hormone therapies aren't going to be effective. So doctors have to take a totally different approach. Okay, so let's put these two totally different tumors right next to each other. We're going to look at what the patient actually sees and feels versus what the pathologist finds under the microscope. And believe me, the contrast is night and day. All right, let's walk through this. For inflammatory carcinoma, what does the patient experience? A breast that gets swollen, red, and warm really fast. But weirdly, there's no actual lump you can feel. But the pathologist sees the real story. Those cancer cells clogging up the lymphatics. Now flip over to medullary carcinoma. The patient finds a pretty clear, soft lump, something that could easily be mistaken for a harmless fibroadenoma. But what does the pathologist see? These big sheets of very abnormal-looking cells, we call them anaplastic, but they're neatly contained by that sharp border, surrounded by that army of immune cells. Two completely different stories. So we've seen these two cancers take wildly different approaches. What are the big takeaways here? Let's boil it all down for the final diagnosis. Okay, if you remember anything, remember this. It's a simple memory rule. For inflammatory carcinoma, think invasion, specifically lymphatic invasion. That's what causes the fluid backup and the red swollen breast with no lump. For medullary carcinoma, think immune. It's all about that strong immune response, that fortress of lymphocytes surrounding the tumor cells. And remember, it's often triple negative. And this leaves us with a really powerful final thought. What medullary carcinoma shows us really is proof of concept. It proves the body's immune system can recognize and fight cancer, building this incredible wall to contain it. So the huge question is, if the body can pull this off on its own for one rare type of cancer, what can we learn from that? How can we get the immune system to do the same thing for all the other types of cancer? Now that is something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.